And so now I am pleased to introduce our presenters for this afternoon. From The Ohio State University College of Nursing, joining us we have Joni Tornwall, who's Manager of Instructional Services, Stephanie Stelmachuk, who is a certified nurse practitioner, and Jody McDaniel, who is Associate Professor at Ohio State University. So ladies, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really looking forward to your presentation. Stephanie, if you are ready, I can go ahead and give you the screen to share your PowerPoint.
Yes, that would be fine. All right, give me just a minute here as I get the PowerPoint set up. And Sarah, will you let me know when you're able to see my screen?
Yep.
I've just got the hourglass here on my computer. I think it's thinking.
Oh, that's okay.
Can you see it?
No, I don't see it yet. There we go. Now I see it.
Okay. Okie doke.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. I want to thank you for attending this webinar about how our team here at the OSU College of Nursing developed these interactive digital case studies in SoftChalk for the advanced pathophysiology course that is taken by all of our students seeking advanced degrees as nurse practitioners. I am Jody McDaniel, an associate professor at the College of Nursing, and I will start by providing a little background about the course and why we wanted to update the way we presented case studies. And Joni Tornwall, as mentioned, is the Manager of Instructional Services. She will follow me and will inform you how the interactive case studies that we created address the standards for quality matters. Joni is our go-to person when seeking innovative teaching methods. And then finally, Stephanie, who recently completed our nurse practitioner program and who was my teaching assistant last year, is the one primarily responsible for creating these interactive digital case studies. And so finally she will share with you the step-by-step process of how she created them in SoftChalk and her ideas for future updates to improve the student experience. So for this pathophysiology course, the student numbers really have risen annually since I began teaching this course 6 years ago. So I am always looking for new ways to present the material in a more personalized, interactive way that meets the students' needs. This course is taught in a blended format for one section, meaning part of the content is presented in class, part online, and then another section containing a smaller number of distant students is taught completely online. So just to give you an idea of the numbers, last year we had approximately 160 students in the blended section and about 55 students in the online section. So for the course objectives for this particular course is that we want the students to analyze relationships between normal physiology and pathophysiology of specific systems as they relate to common diseases such as diabetes, cardiovascular disease, gastric ulcers, etc., across the lifespan. We want to have our students be able to synthesize the current knowledge regarding pathophysiology changes in select diseases. We want them to be able to describe the pathogenesis and the clinical signs of the more common conditions that they will be treating, and we want them to be able to articulate advanced nursing and pharmacologic interventions for these select diseases that we cover. So just to give you an idea of some of the topics that we do cover in the course specifically is that we talk about alterations in inflammation and immunity. We cover cardiovascular, pulmonary, digestive, neurologic, function and dysfunction. We talk about the musculoskeletal system, and we cover thyroid function. This is just to name a few of the primary topics. And we study the pathologic changes from the micro to the macro level, and we also include the effects of genetics and life choices. So some of the challenges with these large numbers of students that we have in this course are really related to, I like to kind of list some of the actual comments that students have given and shared with me over the years, but they often will say there's just so much material, which is true. There's so little time, so now we have on semester, so we have 14 weeks to cover all of this material. They often say the concepts are very difficult. They say, I know the content, but I have trouble applying it to real people. And I can't remember all the details, and the lectures are so dense. So case studies are used for a number of goals and different colleges, College of Medicine, dentistry, all the health sciences use case studies, but they're also used across other colleges as well, not in the health sciences. And the main purpose of case studies is to develop clinical problem-solving skills. They're also to enhance critical thinking, and in terms of our course, we use them to integrate basic pathophysiology risk factors, physical exam findings, and clinical laboratory data. We use case studies to teach appropriate disease management options, and we use them to test students' understanding of main concepts. So why students like case studies? They've often told me over the years that they like them because they mimic real life. They help me to think in a different way. They often will say, I just like the stories. I feel like I'm a real nurse when I'm trying to solve a patient's health problem via these case studies. They tell me that they do help them learn the lecture material, and they tell me that they learn better when these examples are provided to them. Now, the older method of delivery of case studies was simply to provide a scenario of a patient's chief complaint, the past medical history, etc. So you provide the student with some background, and then you begin asking questions of the student based on the scenario. These are just some examples. So straightforward questions we might ask are, if we were talking about someone with hypertension, what pathophysiological mechanisms might explain the etiology of elevated blood pressure in this particular patient scenario? We might ask about pharmacotherapy of hypertension in the scenario. Is it appropriate? Is it effective enough? So those are sort of some of the ideas that we would cover in the old method of simply straightforward providing a scenario, then asking questions. So we began then to ask ourselves, are there better ways to present these case studies, to make the exercise more interactive, to make it more interesting, and as a result to, really the bottom line, to make it more effective. And now Joni will talk about the Quality Matters standards in terms of these case studies.
Thanks, Jody. I am so impressed by what these ladies have done with these case studies, and what I really love is that they are continuously improving these stories and making them better for students, making them more interactive, and really turning up the amount of engagement in those stories. These case studies and the way we present them in Soft Chalk help us meet the Quality Matters standards, and I'll take just a few minutes right now to tell you how. We use these case studies for both the online section and the blended section of the pathophysiology course, and they are serving as models for case study development in other College of Nursing courses. So it is really important to us that this case study element in our courses meet Quality Matters standards, and delivering them in SoftChalk really helps us do that. One of the Quality Matters standards that these case studies help us meet is Standard 3.5 under Assessment, and it states students have multiple opportunities to measure their own learning progress. You'll see the self-check quizzes here in just a minute that are integrated into the case studies, and those are a key part of the learning experience for the student. The scores on those self-assessments aren't recorded. They have unlimited attempts, and the feedback on the correct and incorrect responses is provided through the SoftChalk features. Future iterations of the case studies will use branching logic so the student can follow the consequences of their decisions about the treatment they decide on the patient, the drug therapies, and the patient dispositions. And the feedback feature will be a really important part of that branching logic when we add it to the case studies. The case studies also help us meet General Standard 5, Learner Interaction and Engagement. Standard 5.1 states the learning activities promote the achievement of the stated learning objectives. And Jody has already covered the objectives for this course, so you'll see in Stephanie's presentation how the case studies encourage students to meet those. Standard 5.2 states learning activities provide opportunities for interaction that support active learning. If you're familiar with the QM standards, you know that the annotation for 5.2 describes 3 types of interaction: student to instructor interaction, student to content interaction, and student to student interaction. And I think the strong emphasis in these case studies is student to content interaction, in that they require the student to process and apply high-level concepts and to really learn actively. Jody and Stephanie also encourage the students to work together on the case studies, which encourages them to learn from each other in a really active way. And the case studies help us meet all of the individual standards under General Standard 6, which states course navigation and technology support student engagement and ensure access to course components. It's clear to us that SoftChalk as a tool supports the course learning objectives, which is a requirement of 6.1. The case studies support student engagement and guide the student to become an active learner clearly, and navigation through the case study is clear and efficient because of those SoftChalk features in their navigation. And Standards 6.4 and 5 involve using technologies that are current and easy for students to use, which it's clear to us meet that standard as well through SoftChalk. And finally, SoftChalk helps us meet Standard 8, which deals with accessibility for all students. SoftChalk is, in fact, one of the educational technology tools that Ohio State's Web Accessibility Center endorses as being very accessible and consistent with the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. Next, Stephanie's going to describe her process for creating case studies and give you a quick tour of one of her stories in SoftChalk.
Thanks, Joni. And I just want to say before I start that creating these case studies was definitely quite an adventure. I genuinely do feel like they helped the students, and they also helped me relearn a lot of these concepts as well that I had actually learned the previous year in grad school. So one of the things I think we need to look at before developing a learning activity in any case is kind of some of the theoretical framework or theoretical concepts behind the learning activity we're going to use. And so with that, I'd like to talk a little bit about the art of digital storytelling. An article from 2008 defines digital storytelling as an art of combining narrative or story with digital media such as images, sound, and video to create a short story. And this mode of learning is really advantageous to some of the younger generations, the millennials, who are really good with technology and getting on the computer. Another article from 2011 talks about how digital storytelling makes content and connections relevant to students' lives by helping them bring meaning and purpose to instruction in all content areas. Digital storytelling really helps students make that personal connection to the things that they are learning in the classroom because they can apply them to a real-life scenario. And some of the advantages in storytelling include variation from that traditional lecture-style learning, a little vacation from the classroom. It provides more personalized learning. It makes topics more compelling by allowing students to apply these actual concepts to their practice, and it compares learning to real-life situations and by directly involving the students in their learning. So why did we pick case studies? Dr. McDaniel talked a little bit about this in her earlier portion of the presentation, but just to reiterate, it forces students to apply classroom concepts in real-world scenarios they may encounter. And it helps them transform lecture material that they might initially think is kind of dry and dull into something personal to them. The digital format allows a more creative application of technology, and we can really use technology to enhance some of the concepts we're talking about. For example, in nursing, we might talk to students about certain breath sounds or heart sounds that might indicate a pathologic condition. We can use digital media to actually show what these breath sounds might sound like, or we can bring pictures and videos from the internet to show, you know, what a certain symptom may look like. Once again, it provides a lot more variation to students, making learning a little bit more fun. We really did encourage student interaction with their peers so that they could have more fun with these learning activities. And like in the real clinical setting, different healthcare providers are bouncing ideas off of each other and talking about patients to make the most patient-centered healthcare decision. We wanted students to be interacting in this manner as well. In using the digital format, we had actually a quiz, a graded quiz after students completed the case study, so we were able to assess how well they learned after completing the activity. So next, I'm going to guide you through my process of how to create an engaging story to put into a case study. And there's a handout at the bottom of the page you can feel free to access. It's essentially what's written on this slide. So the first step to creating an engaging story, no matter what your learning discipline is to develop learning objectives. So what is the take-home message? What are the concepts I want these students to learn by the end of the activity? And then you need to consider how are these objectives relevant to the real world and or the student's career. And for some certain disciplines, this is really easy. It's really easy to kind of figure out how pathophysiology might be relevant to a clinical setting, but you might need to do a little bit more thinking for something like math or English. But there's always real-world applications to the things that we are teaching these students, and you just have to figure that out. And then to design a real-world problem that students can solve using these concepts. So in our case, we usually have a patient come in with a clinical presentation and we want them to diagnose the problem and treat it. Then you create a story, you create the actual case study around that problem, and then you can integrate digital media such as YouTube videos, quiz questions, pictures, sounds, etc. And this is where the creation of that case study becomes a little bit more fun, in my opinion. So, and then last but not least, building in self-assessments throughout the story, and then we actually did scored assessments at the end. So just to explain this a little bit more, I will walk you through our case study, but we had quiz questions integrated throughout the story that students could answer, and they could answer them as many times as they wanted to review the content, and then at the end, after they felt like they got enough, they were able to complete an actual graded quiz. And the grades on these quizzes were actually very good. So I'm going to walk you through one of the case studies I created on community-acquired pneumonia. If you see the abbreviation CAP, CAP, throughout the rest of this presentation, that's referring to community-acquired pneumonia. So we wanted students to be able to describe the pathophysiology of CAP, since after all this was a pathophysiology-based class, and then we wanted them to identify different causative organisms. Furthermore, we wanted them to incorporate these pathophysiological concepts into the actual clinical presentation, or the signs and symptoms that people would present with pneumonia. And then we wanted them to formulate just a basic understanding of diagnosis and treatment. By applying the pathophysiological concepts, they actually got diagnosis and treatment in courses that they took later on. So we just wanted a baseline here. And you can access my pneumonia case study through this link at the bottom of the slide presentation. So next, I'll walk you through the development of the case study. So the way that we had formatted it, the first half of the case study went through detailed pathophysiology, clinical manifestations, diagnostic testing, and treatment without a case study. So we listed all the different things we wanted students to read through the learning material. We provided pictures, different forms of digital media to help illustrate those concepts. And then in addition to this, we added a peer-reviewed evidence-based article on pneumonia for students to read prior to the case study. A huge buzzword right now in healthcare is evidence-based practice, so we wanted to make sure that we were applying that to the creation of this case study as well. And then after they reviewed all of that information, the second half of the activity was the actual case study, and that was a story about Kathy Peters, who came to urgent care with pneumonia. And as I mentioned earlier, there were quiz questions that students could take an unlimited amount of times. There were visual aids. We had pictures of her actual mucus that she had coughed up to kind of help illustrate, okay, maybe this is like, can you help diagnose her problem by looking at this? We had pictures of her chest x-ray, etc. And like I said, I will show you these in a few minutes here. And then we had, at the end, a final assessment of knowledge, and that was the actual graded quiz. And as Jody mentioned before, we really did encourage the students to collaborate. They could take the graded quiz together, they could review the actual case study together. We wanted them to bounce ideas off of each other to help enhance learning. So next I'm going to walk you through the actual case study just a little bit. That you can also review on your own time. So I won't take too long to go through this, but this is the picture of Kathy that after she came into the office, and she was really feeling bad. She was feeling wiped out. She felt like she had a cold, but it had persisted for 5 days. And these were her vital signs. And what are you going to do as the clinician? So we had her history of present illness here, her actual description of what's going wrong, her medication reconciliation, and then we had, as I mentioned before, pictures of her mucus to help us kind of decide as a clinician, okay, what does this look like? Does this look like anything? Does this mean anything? And then this is one of our quiz questions. The answer is probably pretty obvious. She probably has community-acquired pneumonia, because that's what this case study is about. One of the features in SoftChalk is you can actually create responses to the answers that students choose. So we explained why community-acquired pneumonia was the correct presentation. You could also explain why chronic bronchitis was not the correct choice for her. And then we go through her physical exam and ask the students to start making diagnostic choices down here with some of these questions. And as I mentioned earlier, these are the questions that students could complete a limitless amount of times. They could complete them as many times as they felt they needed to help them learn the content. This question down here, question number 8, incorporates some of the pathophysiological concepts that we talked about. in the earlier portion of the case study. Here we include a picture of Kathy's chest x-ray, and we wanted the students to decide, is this a lobar presentation or an interstitial presentation? And by choosing that, they could pick out the causative organism, which was one of our learning objectives. And then we can, you can progress through the rest of this case study on your own time and kind of play with it, see how it works. So when creating these digital stories, it's important to think of all the different concepts or the different parts. So an article from 2006 talks about 7 parts of a digital story to make it the most effective. And the first one is point of view. So that's whoever is telling the story. So you as the professor or you as the clinician, how are we looking, what is the point of view of this story? The second one is a dramatic question. So in our case with Kathy, what are we going to do with these symptoms that she has? How are we going to diagnose her and treat her, etc.? It really helps to provide some emotional content to the story to help create that personal connection. And then these last 4 elements of a digital story, I would like to say we're maybe kind of lacking from our digital stories, and in the next portion of this presentation I'll talk a little bit about how we could improve these case studies even more. So including the gift of your voice would be really beneficial. Our students just read content on the computer and looked at pictures, but maybe in the future having somebody tell the story of Kathy Peters, or provide the 5th element, maybe power of soundtrack, provide some music or maybe some videos. Maybe we could even have Kathy Peters talking and say, hey, this is what's wrong. I feel like crud. What should I do? And then economy is kind of just balancing all of these elements in a way that makes sense. And then pacing, making sure that it's not too long and drawn out, but also that it's not too fast, so students can take the time to learn the things that they need to, so that they're not feeling rushed. So looking at those 7 elements, there's several ways that we would like to improve these case studies in the future. As Joni mentioned, we're constantly reviewing and trying to make improvements. So we could add videos of maybe the instructor or a clinician. We could add videos of the patient or the practitioner dialogue. I would love to include some sound bits, such as Kathy's breath sounds or her heart sounds. I couldn't find any videos that I was able to actually incorporate into the case, but there's several sound bits on YouTube or on the internet that would help illustrate that physical exam portion of the assessment way better than just a written description. Incorporating some humor. I did not have much humor throughout the case study, but that might be more easy to do by incorporating voice and soundtrack. Integrating an opportunity for reflection, so maybe asking the students to write a little paragraph after they complete that final graded learning assessment. Developing a branching logic, which would be, I think, really interesting. So instead of having all the feedback for if the students answered a question wrong, they could be directed differently in the case studies. So for example, going back to that first question, had students picked bronchitis instead of pneumonia, we could have guided them through a case study of what would have happened if they would have picked bronchitis, shown them that that was the wrong logic, and then redirected them back to the diagnosis of community-acquired pneumonia. And then one thing that was also suggested to us when we did this presentation in front of a group was to maybe flip how we present the case or present the learning activity. So we would do the actual case study with Kathy Peters first, which would be a little bit more challenging for the students. They could kind of test their knowledge on community-acquired pneumonia before reading through all of the information about community-acquired pneumonia that we provided them at the beginning of the case. So doing the case study first, and then giving them all of the pathophysiological concepts, the pharmacology, the diagnostic decision-making, all of that later on. So lots of ways to improve for future advanced patho courses. And if you guys have any questions, you can email us at the email address listed there. And just once again, the links for the handout and the actual case study are provided here on this last slide. So I will direct back to Sarah.
Thank you so much, Stephanie and Joni and Jody. If anyone has any questions for our presenters, feel free to type those into the questions panel right now and we can do a Q&A. Going back a couple of slides that you were talking about, Miriam has shared that maybe a good idea would be to create a video with the standardized patient maybe telling her story to a nurse. So thank you for sharing that tip. That seems like a good idea. And like I said, if you have any questions, you can go ahead and submit them into the questions panel and we can answer any questions. We do still have some time to answer questions if anyone has any questions. So we do have a question from David. He says, Stephanie, you mentioned that digital storytelling offers advantages to millennials who are tech savvy and who are digital natives. For those students who are digital immigrants, what challenges did you encounter and how did you overcome those challenges?
I think some of the biggest challenge that we had was with just the first case study. Students were a little bit confused about how to get to the actual case study and how to get to the link, but after they were able to access the case study and they were redirected to the link, I just sent it to them in an email to click on. The SoftChalk software is actually pretty intuitive, and they could just read through it and click next, and they didn't really have any issues with it. One other issue that students had was with that first case study, because we did a total of 5 of these, navigating through that first case study, kind of figuring out how to access the quiz afterwards, because the quiz was actually on our big university website and not through the SoftChalk module. Something we could look at doing in the future is incorporating some of the SCORM software so that the quiz would also be incorporated into the case study, or maybe they could have the assessment questions that they could take as many times as they wanted in the case study, but then having them be directed to the quiz within SoftChalk at the end that's actually graded to kind of just break up how many different links they had to click on. But overall, the software is pretty intuitive, and we didn't really have too many issues with people who were digital immigrants, I think that's the terminology.
Yeah, I've never heard that term, but I like it.
I do too.
We did have another question from Gail. So about how long did it take to create the case study?
So the first one took me the longest. The first one we did was on lupus, and it just took me a while because I had to get used to how to use the software, and I had to download it on my computer, and I had to access it through like a remote access login. But once I figured out how to use the software from my computer at home, it didn't take me that long. Probably what took the longest was doing the research just to make sure everything I was including in the case study was accurate and up to date, because we're always getting new evidence in healthcare, so I wanted the most up-to-date material in the cases. But once I did that, they were pretty easy to edit and then export out to the students on our university-wide website.
Great. Another question from Michael. How do online students work with other students? I'm assuming he's talking about in terms of collaboration.
Sure. So we have it's called Carmen, and I keep talking about the university-wide website. I'm not quite sure what the the technological term for Carmen would be. Joni mentioned it yesterday.
It's our learning management system.
Yes, the learning management system. So there's discussion boards on the learning management system that students can collaborate with each other. We had students making study groups on these discussion boards, and I'm sure that they, exchanged phone numbers or email to collaborate on the case studies as well.
And we did have another question. We'd actually have a couple questions come in about how much time it takes the students to go through the case study. So Nancy asked, have you ever tracked the range of time students spend interacting with the case? And did you notice any sort of correlation between the scores and the amount of time that they were interacting with the case study?
That would actually be a very interesting research study, but no, we did not track how much time students spent in the case study, and I'm not really sure how we would do that. Joni might have a better idea. She's always my go-to when I had technology-related questions. So do you have anything to add to that, Joni?
I would love to be able to track those kinds of things, and that is, in fact, our intention with some future case studies in this course and other courses. It's not as easy as it looks to track the time because our learning management system knows how much time a student's computer spent on that particular page, but not how much time the student himself spent. So it's a little bit challenging in that way.
Okay, that does make sense. We did have another question. Ricardo asks, have you encountered any issues, any accessibility issues with digital storytelling? And should they be captioned, for example?
If you want, I can answer that, Stephanie.
Yeah, go ahead, Joni.
We have not thus far encountered any issues like that. I have to say, though, and I mentioned this before, but I probably didn't emphasize it enough, Ohio State's Web Accessibility Center is very, very particular about the presentation of our online content and making sure that it's accessible. And SoftChalk is one of the tools, and I dare say one of the few tools, that they fully endorse as being really, truly accessible. So that's why we have these case studies in SoftChalk. Yes, if you have videos, if you have sound bits that a hearing impaired student might not be able to access, they must be captioned. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I think that does answer the question. And then Tracy also asks, when sharing the course with the students, do you link to SoftChalk Cloud or do you integrate it into your LMS? And remind us again what your learning management system is, just in case people...
Our learning management system is Desire to Learn.
Okay.
We call it Carmen here because
that's
it's
what
just branded Carmen.
Mm-hmm.
Currently we upload the SoftChalk stories to our learning management system. We don't have a license for cloud, but some of the we have some people here who have used cloud and done so successfully.
Okay. And then let me see, we did have another question. How long do you give the how much time do you give the students to actually go through the case study? And then we did have a couple of questions. Can you talk maybe a little bit about how they are evaluated or how you determine the grades?
Sure. So the students are given a limitless amount of time to go through the actual case study and to answer those questions. The way we structure the learning activity is we usually open it on a Saturday morning, and they're given Saturday, Sunday, and Monday to complete the case study and submit the graded quiz, which, just to make sure I was being clear on that, the graded quiz was actually separate from the case study learning activity. It was in the learning management system. So they had all weekend and all day Monday to go through the case and submit that quiz for a grade. And sometimes we would give them one try on the graded quiz. Sometimes we would give them 2 tries, but that was limited. And, we would take their best score and put it in the grade book. But the students were actually able to access the case study for the rest of the semester if they wanted to use it to review. So they could go through it at the end of the semester if they wanted to review lupus or pneumonia or DVTs if that's what they wanted to do. So the learning activity they were really given limitless access to. And what was the second part of that question, Sarah?
I think you covered it. They just wanted to talk a little bit about how long students have, and then about just your grading or evaluation process.
Sure. So the graded portion, the graded quiz portion, was just covering our learning objectives and the concepts that we reviewed in the case study. It was a multiple choice with true-false quiz, and it was usually about 15 questions. So.
And I will just add a comment about the grading. This course had several components making up the final grade, and so some of the testing was done in class with traditional type exams, and so this was just one component that we felt we wanted to add to encourage a less stressful time for students to work together and hopefully enhance their learning because of that. And sometimes I think we become so rigid and strict about all aspects of the grading that we sometimes aren't as open to different methods of learning. And so, but again, this was just one particular aspect. We have to evaluate students, some way, and we want to use various methods to hopefully cover all different learning styles of students have. So some always do quite well when they're under a little bit of stress in a traditional, taking a traditional exam, and others are not that's not such an effective teaching method for others. So just wanted to add that as well.
And another question, has this course been formally evaluated?
Yes, that's a good point. I wanted to add that as well. Students are given an opportunity at the end of this course to comment about instruction methods and the content and all aspects of the course, really. And I wanted to add that for the case studies, we received numerous comments, positive comments about these studies and how working together with other students and just a different style of presenting the material via the soft chalk method was really received in a positive way.
Great. And then another question from Simon. How do you encourage lurkers or non-contributors on forums to actually get active and involved in discussions?
I'll take a stab at that question, Sarah, and Jody, if you want to add anything, feel free.
Sure.
Some of our discussion boards are actually graded discussion boards, not just for this class, but all throughout Ohio State's College of Nursing. Some of them are graded discussion boards, so students are graded on if they respond to other students' posts or if they answer a question correctly and use proper citations and proper learning theory or proper concepts that we're teaching. For the pathophysiology course, we didn't really grade discussion boards per se. That was more of just a voluntary thing. If students wanted to take it upon themselves to collaborate or to ask questions of each other, they could do that, and if not, they didn't have to. The class was so big, it was kind of hard to track individual student discussions with each other, and collaboration was not an actual learning requirement. While we encouraged it, we heavily encouraged collaboration and study groups, and working on these case studies together. It really wasn't required because at the end of the day, group learning really isn't for everybody. So
yes, I would add to that what Stephanie has said is that this is a graduate level course, so we have traditional students who are already RN seeking an advanced degree, and we have other students who have advanced degrees or bachelor's degrees in another discipline who are coming back to become nurse practitioners. So we have different levels of where they are in their learning and knowledge of some of these concepts. So we give them all a choice if they want to work together. As Stephanie said, we encourage that, but there may be some individuals who maybe feel they're already well informed on a particular topic, and we allow them to take the quiz as they want and review the material as they see fit, and in the end it's really left up to the student to how much time they want to spend with this and how they want to complete the studies.
And sort of piggybacking off of that question, Michelle asks, so can you see how the students do on the questions, even though they're not necessarily graded in soft chalk, and can you tell which questions are most often missed?
I'm going to defer that question to Joni because I'm pretty sure you can, or you can program soft chalk to do that. I didn't do that.
Yeah, SCORM does allow us to integrate the soft chalk scores with our learning management system, and we are just now getting into that and really learning how to use it. So it is possible to track that, and it's one of the future improvements that we want to make. We have not done that so far, but surely in the future we will.
Okay, great. And then how do you balance the tension between giving too much information on the case study and not providing enough information? This question comes from Constanza.
Sure. That's a really good question. I don't have a specific art or knack of doing that. I mean, I've had Dr. McDaniel read through it before, and I've had students read through it before, and I try and make it as concise as possible, but still covering all the material that students need to know from the classroom. I guess I would err on the side of providing too much information and not providing enough information. I think students do have a lot of different venues to get the classroom information from, because we do provide them with that evidence-based article, and we do provide them with everything that's summarized in that first portion of the case study. So and I try and keep it interesting by adding pictures, and hopefully down the road adding other different forms of digital media such as videos or audio recordings of breath sounds, heart sounds, etc. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
I think it does. If you want to expand on that, Constanza, feel free to send in another question. So Joel asks, I think you already mentioned this, but how many case studies did you create and use in this particular course?
Sure. We did 5. I believe we did 5, right? We didn't do 6.
Yes.
Did we?
5.
Yeah, we did 5. I think we had 6 created, but we only used 5 because that's just how logistically it worked out the best, dividing it up between every 2.5, 3 weeks of the semester. So 3 weeks of the semester. So yes, we did 5.
Okay. And then Deborah asks, just out of curiosity, has your course received a QM peer review
Do you know the answer to
through
that?
Quality Matters?
No.
It has not, but we are looking forward to sending it through a peer review.
Okay. And I think we have answered all of the questions. We do have a couple minutes left, so if anyone else wants to share any last-minute questions, we can fit those in. Again, I just want to say thank you so much to Jody, Joni, and Stephanie for this presentation. We've had a lot of great comments come in through the questions panel, so again, we really appreciate you taking your time to do this presentation. And we did have one other question. Can you collect free text answers from students? This question comes from Rita.
I believe you can. I will also have Joni respond to this just to make sure that I'm answering this correctly, but since we had like 200 students total between the online and the blended version taking this, we chose not to do that. But I believe that one of the SoftChalk has many different features for the different questions you can ask. And I should have gotten into this a little bit more when I talked about creating the case study, but you can choose matching questions, true, false, multiple choice, multiple answer, and I do believe one of those features is short answer.
Yeah, it is. And it is possible to do that and collect the responses as well, and the SoftChalk team has put that in the text box there. We haven't done that, as Stephanie says, because of the size of the class. The grading burden is just shared between Jody and Stephanie, and they have 200 students, so it's just difficult to read all of those responses.
Yeah, but that would definitely be a really great feature for a smaller course of like 20 to 40 students. I would definitely be willing to use that.
Yeah, and SoftChalk does accept essay questions among a lot of different other varieties of questions that you can ask. And we didn't have any other questions come in. I'm going to go ahead and take back the screen and just share my last slide. Unless Joni, Jody, Stephanie, do you guys have anything else that you would like to add before I take back the screen?
No.
I think I'm good.
No, I don't.
Okay. Yep, sorry, okay. Now you should be able to see my screen. So, like I mentioned before, the examples that we shared today and that we will share in the future sessions are just a representation of how our presenters took the QM standards and adopted it into a practice that fits their own unique situations. So like the quote says, best practices represent one way to do things, and be sure that the practice fits your situation. We would love to hear your own best practices and tips, so we encourage everyone to share their own best practices in online course design by tweeting us. You can tweet us at SoftChalk or at QM Program. And you can use the hashtag SCQMBP and share your own best practices. And you never know, you might be able to actually share those practices at the QM conference. If we receive some really great tips, we might be sharing those ones at the conference. And also keep a lookout for upcoming webinars in our series. Like I said, we do have one scheduled between now and September each month, and I will be sharing a link to, the link is at the bottom of this page, but I will be sharing it in the chat panel to our landing page where you can view the archives of the previous sessions and register for new sessions that are upcoming. We do have a session coming up on July 23rd, and registration will open for that session soon, so be on the lookout for an email with some registration information on that session. And if you'd like more information about today's presentation, you can contact our presenters. Their emails are on the screen. And for more information about SoftChalk or Quality Matters, you can visit our websites, or you can send an email to learnmore@softchalk.com, and we will be happy to get back to you with more information. And again, Stephanie, Joni, Jody, thank you so much for your presentation. We really enjoyed it, and I think everyone really learned a lot.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Sarah.
And thank you, everyone, today for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at the next webinar. I hope everyone has a great afternoon.